Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we know people are joining us from different parts of the world. My name is Pradeep Nayak, and I am at the University of Waterloo. I'm also representing here the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for Strong Small-Scale Fisheries. I'll be hosting and moderating this talk today. I will start with a few rounds of introduction before we get to our speaker to listen to the talk today. First, I will start introducing the V2V Global Partnership, which is a transdisciplinary research, knowledge, and action network with over 100 members from Africa, Asia, Canada, and internationally. The goal of the global partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand and work on vulnerability and viability concepts is not just to understand it in an economic sense, but also to capture and focus on all aspects of human life that range from the political, the cultural, ecological, environmental, and all aspects. Our focus is on co-production and co-creation of knowledge that is essential for vulnerability to viability transitions, creating a repository of the information, co-created information, and into a database, developing multifaceted capacity right from the community to the policy and civil society, synthesis and integration of the knowledge which can inform governance arrangements, and also engage in multi-level knowledge mobilization. The V2V Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key civil society, NGO, government, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability and visibility. We are conducting transdisciplinary, community-engaged, policy-driven research in 6 countries in Asia. That includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa, which includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the V2V Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The V2V thematic webinar series, for which we all have gathered here virtually today, is an initiative of the V2V Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, government representatives, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, the practical, and the policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and also globally. V2V thematic webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month, and it will continue to be so throughout the year 2025 and beyond. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details can be found at www.v2vglobalpartnership.org. So, please watch that space for future webinars. Today's webinar is the 3rd in the series of V2V thematic webinars planned for the year 2025 and the 51st since January 2021 when we started this series. And it is my privilege today to introduce Dr. Richard Nyiawung as our distinguished speaker for the talk. Dr. Richard Nyiawung is a postdoctoral fellow at the School of Environment, Enterprise and Development, University of Waterloo, Canada, and he works as a postdoctoral fellow as part of a global project which is called the Aramath, which focuses on health and well-being and biodiversity focused on indigenous people. Dr. Nyiawung is an interdisciplinary social scientist and a human geographer with a PhD degree in geography and international development studies from the University of Guelph in Canada. He has a master's degree in environmental policy from Memorial University of the Newfoundland in Canada as well. And he completed his bachelor's degree in agriculture from the University of Bo in Cameroon. Dr. Nyiawung was also a human and planetary health postdoctoral scholar at the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions at the Stanford University, during which time he taught really important courses on the topic of food security and food and nutrition and small communities. Originally from Cameroon, Central Africa, Richard was born and raised in the coastal city of Limbe, where coastal and ocean-based livelihood provides numerous economic opportunities and food security. That kind of build the foundation for his continued work into the future. Through storytelling and people-centered research, Richard is passionate about actionable policies that promote the inclusion and empowerment of marginalized small-scale actors, both in fisheries and also in this agriculture and farming sector and their communities as well. He has extensively collaborated with academics, development practitioners, policymakers, and community partners in different settings, including numerous countries. If I may just list a few of them, that includes Cameroon, the Gambia, Namibia, Liberia, Ghana, Senegal, Nigeria, Uganda, India, Thailand, and Canada, and of course North America itself, where he is currently located. Dr. Nyiawung research interests include aquatic food systems, livelihoods, governance, and human and planetary health equity. His numerous publications focus on the above topics and goes beyond. And you can have a list of his publications by just searching his credentials on the internet. Outside of his work, Richard is a passionate community leader, often organizing social and recreational sports events for children and adults. In his work sphere, he is currently co-editor of a forthcoming book on small-scale fisheries in Africa, and we're looking forward to that book. In his own words, Richard says, I was born and raised in a small-scale fishing community in Limbe, Cameroon, which has influenced my interest in and love for everything fish. And we will get to hear some of that in the talk today. So it is my real honor today to invite Dr. Richard Nyiawung to deliver today's talk for the V2V thematic webinar series March 2025. And Richard's talk is titled as a Transboundary Governance Approach for Small-Scale Fisheries in the Gulf of Guinea. Over to you, Richard. Thank you very much for making the time, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you, Pratik. I'll just go ahead to share my screen. Okay. So is my screen good? Can you see my screen? Okay. Thank you so much. I mean, I didn't know I would be able to live this up to that profile, but thank you so much for that brief introduction. I mean, I'm still an early career scholar trying to still build my name in the space, but thank you so much, Pratik, for that this wonderful introduction. So, I mean, I like the way you closed the whole intro, just trying to like really talk more about my interest in this space, So, but I mean, today I would like to like just share more on these transboundary governance issues happening within the Gulf of Guinea. So, I mean, so many people might be like, asking, where is the Gulf? So one of my key, I'll just start by just giving like a little bit of a trend. So the medicine Gulf of Guinea is really found in between West and Central Africa. So if you know the African map, it's found more in the Western in Western medicines, yeah, but Central Africa. And one of the key issues there is that as a Gulf, there is a whole scramble for natural resources. We have a lot of like things in terms of crude oil, fisheries, maritime transmissions, all happening within that space. So of course, as we know, like in many other coastal areas or coast or areas where we have the coast, there's always this fighting between those staying within those communities and those who are out there to exploit more of the resources. So we have what we call like So we have more of a what we call like maritime like attacks within those areas. And of course, like here, like what we have seen in the Gulf over the years is that we have seen the fight between local communities trying to also interact and then fight for their access to the resources. Same as also we have external actors like foreign bodies coming from all over the world to extract most of the resources within that area. And that has also led us to a lot of illegal maritime activities happening within that space. Like you see a lot of contraband goods, illegal oil. I mean, I think crude oil, I think businesses happening within that space. So the Gulf of Guinea, just like most of the Gulf areas, has challenges in terms of like the resources, maritime issues, and also all the illegal activities. So I mean, one will now ask yourself, how does this really concern us within this space? So I mean, I mean, so I think that just for us to just give a little bit of context, like what is really happening in the Gulf. So, of course, as a coastal zone, there's a lot of fishing activities happening there, maritime activities, and also crude extraction. So, the medicine picture you see on my right, it just shows more of like what happened. Like, so I took this picture in 2022 when I was in the field doing my field work. So you can see within that same space, we have like these very big shapes moving along the coast. But also one thing that we fail to also say is that there are also fishing boats happening within that same space. And also we have this massive industrial fleet and we also have small other boats who are also trying to also make sure they have their own livelihoods. And one thing that allowed the Gulf to be a little bit open and vulnerable is that most of the access there is most of the area it is open access. So the community have access into the coast, foreign boats and fields have access into that area. And also we lack like there is not too much coordination happening within that spaces. But one thing that we have now seen is that once we have a very big competing space that there is bound to be I think, conflict between who want to really get more of the resources there. And but of course, over the years, co- countries have been trying their best in terms of improving their security, police force to be able to like really see how they can monitor the region. But of course, monitoring the maritime space is quite big. It takes a lot of money, investment resources. So the countries have been trying to really beef up their security to avoid all the piracy issues and to be able to really help ensure there's an enabling friendly environment within the Gulf. So, but that not just to one of my own point, like, okay, why am I being interested in this area? So, I mean, I was born in a small community called Limbe in Cameroon, which is like it's in part of the Gulf. And I mean, when I was born, I didn't really know I would be like my whole life will now be built about studying more about this community. So I was just a normal guy who goes into the beach, seeing how they harvest fish, buy them a fish. But I've seen over the years a lot of changes happening. I mean, when I was born in the early 90s, like you could see a lot of automatic fish. In fact, fish was so cheap that we could always just go there, you buy it. But right now, when I was there for my PhD research, we I think we now saw how many of the resources it is this is yeah, like I mean, fish has now become so expensive. I mean, a goods that was quite accessible by the local man has now just become a very expensive resource. So why? Because most of the fish stocks have been degraded, a lot of harvesting has been done, and the fish catches are going down over the years. So people's livelihood are at stake. So that's why I saw myself as an African and as somebody from that region to really spend more time to understand what is really happening there, what are some of the different dynamics within all the spaces. So this area really comes on a very personal note. I was born there. I'm an African, and I really identify as one of those scholars trying to really push some of the research in the area. In fact, Cameroon for the past 10 years there was not nobody talking about this fishery. So, but I've been able to invest time as a Cameroonian too, and as I'm usually, of course, part of the Gulf, to be able to really study some of the dynamics within this area. So this area is quite personal to me, and I really like to just share more into that. So, but in terms of like, okay, now our main talk here, of course, we are more into the V2V area. So I would like just zoom in more into the fisheries aspects within the space. So fishing within the Gulf really plays a very big role in terms of how people have access to like food. Of course, those who stay around the coast, fishing is like a very main key livelihood because they go into the ocean, they harvest fish, they come, sell it, and they also consume some. Also, they also have like the traditions linked to the ocean. And of course, as you can see this in pictures on my left, this is a pure traditional fishing community in the coast of Limbe, where you could see the people still use traditional boats, still be able to like go into the sea, use their hand and medicine paddles to be able to go harvest fish for their family and to also sell to the yeah, general public. But what has happened over the years and we have seen is that there have been massive expansion of industrial fleets. And of course, somebody will now ask, how come we have these massive industrial fleets happening within that space? The government uses this as a rent-seeking opportunity. Of course, Cameroon or most of the countries in the Gulf, they are all like this, resource-poor countries. They need this money to be able to run the government. So one way is for them to lease out some of this ocean space to the Chinese. Like, for example, Cameroon has leased out their own ocean for like 8 years to the Chinese, where they have the opportunity to be able to come and harvest enough fish as they can. But of course, when that happen, you now see that there will be interest between the local fishers who are trying to survive, and we have these massive industrial fleets who are here just to harvest the fish for their own economic gain. And of course, within that happen, you see a lot of conflict happening. So I mean, you can do count. There are countless of times where we have seen incidents of like fishers being killed on board or being having like just facing issues with the industrial fleets, or where the industrial fleets damages some of their nets, attack them. But the whole dynamics is just funny because you have in the one end the local vulnerable fishers who don't really have the protection from the government. But now, since the government has leased out all these industrial, they see to these industrial fleets, they are the ones now who has more power. In fact, we have even seen cases where the government send military to protect this foreign fleet because they bring in money through rent compared to their local people. So there's a lot of like conflict, tension, domestic issues happening within the Gulf, where they are trying to like really see, okay, how do we now really create balances? Of course, like even just looking at the picture on my left, how do you expect a small person having this kind of boat to compete with a very massive industrial fleet? There's a whole confusion there. But one thing that we fail to understand is that people were born and raised in the Gulf, and they have been able to like really stay there for centuries. And it's also part of their cultural dynamics. There's a lot of movement of people around the Gulf of Guinea or along that coast that makes them to be attached to the ocean. But with all these changes from industrial fleets, expanding maritime activities, because everybody's watching towards the ocean to get enough economic gain. So there is that tensions happening within the whole Gulf. But that is not even the main using challenge here. One trend that we are seeing, because one other key thing that I would like to highlight is that in the Gulf, there is a lot, the interest there is in the small pelagics. So because that is what is really consumed mostly locals, like in terms of the cuisines, in terms of the meals that they will cook, small these pelagics play a very big role. But unfortunately, due to climate change and other stressors, what we are seeing now, as you can see the picture on my right, is that the fishes are now moving more northward. As the recent tropics keep getting hotter, most of the fishes in species are now trying to move more towards north because they are moving towards the recent colder waters where they can better reproduce and then have more there. So we now see a case where fish species that were dominant in Cameroon, in Nigeria, Ghana, they are now moving up north towards Mauritania, up that area where, and of course, when that happened, is that those who traditionally consume some of these fishes, they don't really have access to those same species again, because it's now found in a whole different region. And what we are now seeing is that what happens to this fish. So imagine you just stay in your distant community and out of nowhere you have excess fish of different species that you are not traditionally used to. So Mauritania, Senegal, they are now seeing a lot of these fishes coming down from the distant Gulf, and okay, what do they do with it now? So what we are now trying to now see is that there's one excess of these fisheries, like all diversity in the fish stocks happening up there. While down in countries like Cameroon, Ghana, they are now losing their own fish stock because all the fish are trying to move more up north. But when that happened, what we are seeing, as you can see on my left, is that there are two key issues here. We have now the expansion of fish meals, where a lot of them are now opening factories in those northern American countries to be able to now use some of these species that are not being eaten by the locals there to now create fish meals where they use for aquaculture and other uses. But now you now ask yourself, what happens to those who are now down as below, like in Ghana, where they don't get their local fish that they used to always medicine consume. So, but one trend that we are seeing, and of course, I have some of my friends who are trying to work in this space, and they have won some very big grants, is that they are trying to see how we can reroute the whole fish trade. So, when these fishes move up north, they can be processed, dried, and then sent back down into those countries where it is really being valued and consumed. So what we are seeing, as you can see on my right, is that there is a new market opportunities where fishes are now leaving from Senegal, coming down to uh, 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 Togo. More, so I know, and also there are those new ideas how we can now see this transboundary trade of fish where people can produce fish. I mean, they can process fish in one area, then sent to another area where the fish stocks are not really enough so that they can be able to meet the food security needs within the region. So we have all the dynamics happening where there is interest in the Gulf, there is this movement of fisheries, and there is a need to also help the contribution of fish within the food security these policies in that region. And that now goes into us now understand with all the movement of these fisheries and things, how is this system being governed? Like, how do we even understand the governability of the Gulf? Because that means it's a whole complex environment now. So, I mean, yeah, we just draw from the work of Gentov. I mean, I was happy, was like our guest speaker here in this early months of the year, is that they had this governability framework where the first thing is to understand what is the governance system. So, as it stands now in the Gulf, we have like mostly the national governments. They try their best to manage fishes within their own territory. So every country, Cameroon, Ghana, let's say Nigeria, they try to have policies within themselves to how they can best manage the whole as fisheries. But yes, we also have these regional bodies that they are supposed to work across board, like the I mean, there's the fisheries, yeah, Medicine Commission for Western and Medicine Central Africa, where they are trying to be able to like see how can we really manage fisheries across the whole this country. But you see, there's a lot of movement of fish, movement of people, and also one other key thing that they spoke about is the system to be governed. Who are the key actors here? In fact, I'm going to really dwell more on my talk on who are the key actors here, and of course, how is the interactions across the system to be governed and the people themselves. How do they really interact? So I just draw this lens just as a teaser or just as a heuristic to be able to for us to really understand that how can we manage a very complex system where there's a lot of there's moving parts, people, fisheries, resources, trade, all happening within the same space. So I mean, if you travel to other countries, they don't have this kind of dynamics where fishers really move around like that because each person stays in their own as a country. But in West and Central Africa or in the Gulf, there exists a lot of these movements happening within that space. So, like, but one other key thing that we want to first of all understand is that in the Gulf, like one thing we have seen, there's a lot of movement of migrant. I mean, as fishers. So many fishers move from one country to the other. One, they are trying to follow the fishing channel. I mean, you might start to fish in Liberia, you find yourself settling in Cameroon, to Nigeria because of the movement of people. So there is that free movement of fishers across the board because they are trying to pursue and to find the whole medicine fish because they are following the pathway of the fish. So, but now with the fishes moving, so at first we saw a trend where people were living more northern Senegal, listen, Liberia, coming downwards towards this Cameroon. But now we are seeing where with the fish stocks moving upwards, we don't know how that will also influence the migration of fishers. Are they also going to continue to move upwards, or how is that going to be? So these are just some of the key dynamics that for generations, there have been this movement of people across the whole Gulf. Like they keep moving, changing medicine countries. But now someone will now ask, who are the key actors within all these spaces? So and I mean, so this is where it like really gets let's say interesting. So the work I did, so I mean, in 2022, some press analysis, like the main picture here, you can see on my top right, it just shows how like fish can live from this in Ghana here, and it's being sold across this border to Togo as Benin. So we have this movement of people across the countries just to be able to like sell fish. And then also in 2020, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we're trying to also understand like what is the impact of medicine COVID within these countries. And we spoke to people in Liberia, like as you can see on the medicine picture on this bottom right, and in Cameroon. And it was just shocking how in Liberia, most of the fishers that were there, they were all Ghanaians. While also, I would say, in, in in Cameroon, we now also saw how most of the fishers there, they were Nigerians. So you can now see how there are lots of, so the key actors happening within these spaces are the migrant fishers. So the key point here is that there's a lot of migration that have occurred for generations, and people have moved and settled in these countries. In fact, I was born in Cameroon, but I did not know that the fisheries system was dominated by people from other countries like Nigerians, Ghanaians, yeah, but yeah, they control most of the fishing happening there. Of course, we have like local engineers, fishers as well, but there's a lot of control of these migrants within that space. So you now ask yourself, of course, in the past years, a lot of work has been done about how do we really govern small-scale fisheries. So talking about how they are being marginalized, so, but this, most of the times we talk about the indigenous fishers within those spaces. So imagine now that what happens to a system where it is just full of migrant fishers who dominate most of the activities. How does that even play in terms of the governability of that system? And that's why one key thing here that we have seen is that there is that second layer that those in this space have to start to really think. How do we manage a system that is controlled mostly by migrants? Of course, like we know about, this immigration and all other stuff is that migrants or immigrants don't really have enough voice as locals. Like for example, I'm a Cameroonian. I don't expect to have the same voice going to Nigeria or to Ghana to be able to like talk. But then I control most of the fish harvesting within that area. So this work just came up when I was trying to really do most of the research in the area, like trying to talk with people. Like as you can see the picture on my bottom left, that is a Cameroon fisheries office, but it has been closed by the coast. You don't see anybody trying to really help these fishers because of what? One, they are all migrants. So even when they have issues with the foreign fleets, they can't really air their voices because there is no good channel. The voice of a migrant within the same space cannot be the voice of a local. So that is one aspect that we're trying to like think, okay, how do we now manage? So because this brings a second layer of complexities. Generally, locals themselves within the same space are being marginalized. Then to talk less about how do we see small scale fishers who are now migrants, who are not indigenous of those areas. So the whole of these aspects has to create a whole new dynamics, the way we see fisheries management around the Gulf of Guinea. And then here, one thing that I've been trying to like really do is to draw more on like Andrew Song's work. So Song was the first, among many other scholars who really came up with this transboundary research idea, because you see, fisheries move beyond just staying in one place. So you don't expect a fish to just stay in Cameroon or in Nigeria, but they move across borders. So we have these transboundary resources where there's a movement of fish stocks. We have also fishing activities where people follow the fishing channels. We also have fish trade, and also one key thing. But now the point is, how do we understand the governance of this transboundary system? Most of the times, we always talk about governance within a particular system, within a particular space. But this is a case where there's a movement of both the resources, informal trade, and also in terms of how the resources are being done. So we need a system now, and that's why one approach is a boundary governance approach where the management is being seen just beyond a country itself. But how can we now also integrate across multiple countries. So how can this really be done? So Song really outlines clear typologies on how best we can really understand. And which one key thing about the transboundary the governance is to understand who are the actors within that spaces? What are the trends we are seeing? So it needs a lot of like this is scholars to be able to really document some of the changes happening within spaces. We have really seen how there is a northward movement of fisheries. So meaning fish stocks are like changing. So we need communication across countries, scholars trying to like understand and document and then see how to help countries around them Gulf. So that's why one idea is how do we really integrate or do we really see how the transboundary research the West African area really stands as a very key case medicine study in this space to understand some of the dynamics happening within the area. And one approach here is that I mean, of course, someone can say, can this even work? Yes. So right now we have a lot of like this regional bodies. So across like the Gulf, we have like this West African body, Central African body, who are all already I mean, interacting to like manage the people and the resources within those medicine places. And then also we have all these regional fishery bodies as well who have been doing activities in that space. But what we really lack now is that how do we really find out or how do we do research that can be able to like really understand some of the dynamics happening in the whole of that area. So but yeah, the point is that as in many other developing areas, most of these countries don't have the resources to make investments or to even do some kind of research in those areas or to even have the power within their countries to manage, because even just within a particular country alone, there are issues on how to manage their own fisheries stocks. Then talk less of how can we now see how to bring multiple countries talking within the same space. Because as we have seen with the movement of people, the resources, there is a need for that cross-country interconnection to for them to be able to like really talk more. But how will that kind of a dynamics work is a question that we researchers have to be able to really understand. And what we are saying is that there are some issues that are really that might challenge this transboundary governance. And one of the key main point there is that we have seen where there are already poor governance systems happening within the space. Countries don't invest a lot. Like for example, Cameroon, which is my main as a country, there are really no good small-scale fisheries and medicine policies because nobody really cares. All what the government cares is how much rent do we get from the ocean. So we don't really see policies, that are being able to really empower or give like support this system for the small fishers to be able to manage more in the resources. Then what if now we want to talk about a more transboundary? So even if there is no country level policies to be able to manage these fisheries, then what now happens if we're talking more about the transboundary governance? So that brings a lot of complexities that need to be addressed. Another point is that there is a lack of inter-country medicine talks. Like, for example, you don't really see communication between between fisher folks in Nigeria, talking to those in Cameroon, in Senegal. So there is just lack of those funding because, of course, all this comes with a cost. And then, as you know, developing areas they don't have enough funds to even enable those knowledge exchange. But if we had platforms where the real fishing actors, the ministers, the governments, they can meet and talk on what is even happening. How can we take stock in terms of what changes do we see across the day? Because those kind of dialogues are not really there, and that's where we as scholars have a very big role to hone or to make some of these issues that, hey, we need to pay attention to what is happening there and how can we really best manage some of these issues. But of course, there's a lot of things to begin in terms of if we think of a more transboundary approach in the Gulf. And one area is just, and then as we have seen, although they speak, I mean, of course, most countries in the Gulf, some speak French, some speak English, but there is that cultural and medicine ties, like people still hold cultural root, ethnic roots across the Gulf. So if we really encourage this transboundary and medicine as a governance, one way is that it's going to really help connect more of the people in those areas. And then two, with all the changes we are seeing, like and of course, we have more change coming from the unfolding effects of climate change, is that we shall now see where fish stocks are being moving. So how do we really find a response pathway to these changes happening within the Gulf? And also one other way is how can these countries come together in the same space to be able to like really harness some of the benefits happening within the area. So these are just some of the few thoughts that we're trying to like really think on how best can we really use the transboundary governance approach to be able to like really help fisheries within the Gulf, for them to be able to like really manage some of the complexities, and for them to like also address some of the key issues. And that's why we are now saying that there is a more need for uh, uh, research. And also, I mean, of course, we have a lot of like uh, yeah, but academics within these spaces who have been trying to make, because one of the key issue is that we have the maritime issues like transportation, fishing issues, piracy issues, security issues, of course. So how do we all combine and really talk more? So this really counts more into not just doing a transboundary approach, but also a transdisciplinary approach where we are doing science or research that brings academics, fishers, communities, and governments on the same platform on how best can we really talk on some of the dynamics happening within the Gulf to be able to help small-scale fishers. I mean, of course, we are here within the V2V realm on how to help them address some of the vulnerabilities so that they can become more viable for now and in the future. So these are just some of the approaches where we are seeing transboundary fisheries governance as a very key lens to help and enhance most of the activities within these spaces, and to push yeah, I'm gonna say forward. So, I mean, this is also some of the few things I wanted to also like just to like share in this talk, just to like tease some of these thoughts on how can transboundary governance really be a key role in the Gulf of Guinea to really help these countries where there is that very strong interconnections. And also one of the key role is that how do we also include the voices of migrant fishers within those spaces, because we have seen how they really dominate a lot of activities. So we can't always keep talking about governance or this governability of small-scale fisheries, but it is to really understand who are the key actors and how do we include them in terms of the management and the policies within all these spaces. So with that being said, this was just like a key main point I want to like share in this talk, and I'll be happy to like really engage more. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was really, very interesting and meaningful, case study, that starts from one place and but then, expands into uh, taking this transboundary nature, it's very interesting to see how movements of fish can influence movement of people,
Yeah.
and to my mind, it shows the intricate relationship between fish and people. Uh, Therefore, how people are influenced in terms of their lifestyles, their place of habitation. Uh, which is largely, as you've shown in your case study, influenced by the fish movement itself. So
Yeah.
we will open this for questions now from the audience. I have a few, but I will keep them to the last. So now I'm going to read some of the questions that we have received from our viewers and audience. So the first question is from Faluke Ariola from Nigeria. And Faluke is asking, there are some foreign fishing fleets that must not be allowed within the national waters because of their habitual IUU. This calls for a concertedly planned collaborative effort within the Gulf of Guinea, uh, That's the comment. And then the
Yeah.
question is, are you saying in Cameroon, coastal waters have been rented out and national policies do not regulate their trawling activities? Are there not national fisheries regulations within the arrangement?
Yeah. No, no, thanks. I mean, even when I was doing this talk, I knew she would be the one to ask the first point, but I know she works more in that area. So thank you so much for this point. So, I mean, Cameroon is a very, let's say, interesting case, and then, so what we have seen is that, of course, if you rent out your medicine property to like anyone, they feel they have their right. So, I mean, but sadly, what we have seen over the years is that the government invest more time to like really support or to like listen, protect most of these fleets because they are listen, paying rent. So even when the small scale fishers go and listen, complain that hey we have been they are listen, able to damaging our boats, having all listen, yeah all the fisheries, they don't really have a voice because these people have paid rent. They have paid billions of, I mean, about dollars, So how do you really manage somebody who is paying you enough income? So what we have seen is that for now, there is really no law that really protects how they may say, operate within those spaces. But we have seen that they feel like they have more power because, of course, like even within those fleets, you see the Cameroon military protecting the foreign fleets compared to their own as a local. So that just shows how there's a little bit of mixed match there between who do we really guide? Is it our citizen or is it those boats? So as of now, I'll say clearly that based on my work in the country, there is really no framework, and I'll be happy to really hear more from your own place how it's been done. But there is really no framework that really shows how best we can manage these musky fishes or how to really protect the IUU activities happening within those spaces. And then also, Cameroon to not really have enough like coast guards or security people who can be able to monitor all these activities even if they have the instructions to protect more of the foreign fleets compared to their own local fleets. So there is this dynamic between whose interests. And of course, we have seen the government, they will tell you clearly they need the money to sustain the government. So how do you really manage somebody who is paying you income and rent? You have to protect them. So there is that dynamic still happening within the Cameroon space. But thank you so much for that. I mean, that was one key issue that always comes up in this area. How do we really bring in the foreign fleets and how do we really make sure they follow their rules? So thank you, Edison, so much just for that point. Yeah.
Yeah, but the part of the question is also about, are there any national fisheries regulations in place,
Yeah.
or there
No,
absolutely no
no,
policy?
no, no. So that's why I'm saying that Cameroon really lacks that framework. There is really no strong governance framework that really puts in place what needs to be done. And that's why like what I'm trying to do in my next point is that how do we really bring this into the community yeah i- into the policy realm. Like, how do we start to really talk more about how do these people or how can we really bring fisheries into the government policy? Because of course, nobody's even talking about this. They are just left on their own. And I said one key point too is that Cameroon has a lot of migrant fishers, so people don't really care. So their voices are not really heard because it's not really the locals crying. It is mostly the migrant people crying. So that's why I said we need to think of this double layer on how do we really manage these fisheries where there is a more influence of migrants within the same space. So the government don't really care on how to bring laws and policies to protect them because they are not really raising locals from that
Mhm.
medicine places. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting case, in terms of policy making, because
Yeah.
the critical question is, how do you make policies for
A
for,
migrant.
for
E-
non-citizens, like
Exactly,
people, yeah.
exactly,
So how the
exactly.
state makes policy for people that are not its citizens, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's an
I,
interesting.
I, yeah, and also one thing I was there even in the coast is that even the officials were scared to even talk to me. But the point is, I was born there, so I know our local languages, But because they're like, when they see anybody coming from this thing outside, they think you are listening, sort of, yeah, from the government, and government only come there to like maybe impose laws, take out and, fines and stuff. So they are even scared to talk, So but you're in a system where 80% of the fishers in Cameroon are all little migrants, but how is their voices being heard? So there is that dynamics
Exactly.
happening there where, I mean, if you travel, migrants don't really have enough voices in countries that is not really their own. So there is that dynamics happening there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you raise a really interesting question, issue here, in response to Ariola's question, is that how can fisheries policies be inclusive
Yeah.
in contexts,
Yeah.
like, migrant fishers, because
Yeah. Yeah.
traditionally or conventionally, policies have been there, but they
Yeah.
tend to exclude people that don't belong to that place.
Exactly.
But here
Exactly.
is the question, how within a transboundary fisheries governance arrangement, inclusive policies can be bring in that pays attention to
Yeah.
people that don't,
Yeah.
culturally or historically belong to that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
leads to more inclusive policies, therefore, more, inclusive, fisheries governance and management process.
Exactly.
It's a very interesting question, but we'll
Yeah.
move on to the next one. Thanks, Ariola, for that, important question. So the next question is by Abdul Rahim. And the question is, this is an interesting governance issue, as we were discussing, obviously. Wondering if there are successful experiences of transboundary governance in other fisheries regions that lessons can be drawn from.
Mm. Wow. That's a very, I would say, that's a big one. So I mean, so one other point is that as of now, I don't really know. I don't know. I'm able to, I can put it, perhaps you can be able to like really just say, help me here. Because if you go to countries like in Asia, they don't really have these transboundary issues where you have a lot because countries themselves try to manage their own fisheries, you know. But this is a unique case where we are seeing in West Africa where there is this movement of people and the fisheries, you know. So there's that fluidity across those areas. But I'm sure in Asia, I don't know, please really help me here. I'm not sure if maybe a fisher from like you say about Indonesia to Malaysia, if they really move across like that. But this is a case where it is not just a foreign fleet, but we are seeing small scale fishers as well. So they use their boats and they move across the countries. But I'm sure in other areas we shall see able to mostly like industrial big boats going across. Of course, there they will have like arrangement, you say, yeah, across the countries. So I don't really know of another best bet cases. So that's why this is like a new area where we're trying to like see that how do we really govern or manage in an area where there is that easy movement of people across, countries and boundaries. I know. So how do we do that? So for now, I would say for sure, I don't really know a very best bet example, but where I know that it's a very good case study is the West African case where there is that fluidity and movement of people across those areas. But thank you. I'm going to invest more on that and to really search more. But I know the transboundary issue really starts more. But I also know more about So, but for now, I don't really know a lot about other medicine
Yeah.
areas. Yeah.
I have a slightly different take on this question.
Mhm.
Um, the moment you say, face moves, okay, and
Yeah.
this has
Yeah.
been, we have studied this, and others have studied this as part of commons theory, and we always
Mhm.
say, fish is a fugitive resource, so it doesn't stay in
Mhm.
one place; they just
Yeah.
swim
Yeah. Yeah.
away. The
Yeah.
moment you're looking at a fugitive resource, the interesting angle is the transboundary angle. They always cross
Yeah.
boundaries, and if you're
Yeah.
chasing the
Yeah.
fish, then most fisheries, management systems are transboundary in nature. In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah. That's true.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a number of them, but I don't know whether successful or not because these are all
Exactly.
continuous processes of struggle and
Exactly.
achieving,
Exactly.
success in bits and pieces, and then sometimes failure. But there are programs, so in the Caribbean, the CARICOM and the other,
Yeah. Yeah.
collaborative agencies, networks that have come up. Bay of Bengal is another example.
Mhm.
Martin Baving and Yuri Solstein have done a lot of work in South India, linking with Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all mostly, as far as I know, focuses on issues, that are
Conflict
already deep
and
rooted
conflict.
or emerging,
Yeah.
so like conflicts
Yeah.
and other things, and effort to resolve some of these through transboundary governance kind of
Yeah.
arrangements. So these are all ongoing processes. Success and
Yeah.
failure are relative terms,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yes, there are many, many, many of those,
Yeah.
initiatives that exists around the world in terms of dealing with transboundary nature of not only fish. There are transboundary, aspects of various other problems. One of my students is working on plastics in the ocean, and plastic is
Yeah,
so
it
transboundary.
goes. Yeah,
Starts from
yeah,
somewhere and then ends up
yeah,
somewhere else. So there
yeah,
are many, many ocean problems that are not only fisheries in nature, but are transboundary and needs to
yeah,
be also governed within the same ambit of things. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay. So I don't see any questions here, but I want to go back to fish swimming away, and
yeah, yeah,
you know, uh, when you were talking about how fish moved north in the Gulf of Guinea, and
yeah,
how that kind of followed a number of other practices and
yeah,
human movement as well. So I was observing that fish moving away in many ways represents, in the Gulf of Guinea at least, that uh, food is also moving away. Okay.
yes, exactly.
um,
Yeah,
uh, Food, medicine, cultures moving away from one place to other. So on
yeah,
one
yeah,
side, uh, culture, food, medicine is moving away, but
yeah,
on the other side, fish that swims away from one place to the other because it is not culturally rooted there. Because so if we say fish is a cultural food in in Cameroon, and when it swims away, say up to the coast of Senegal, that particular fish may not be cultural. It becomes economic resources. So this
no, no,
conversion of cultural importance of a fish could become a
exactly.
more economically important. So there are many, many characteristics in that moment itself.
Yeah,
And of course, that gives rise to new policy in the policy sphere, but also within the local context itself. Different types of conflicts and different types of interactions and all. I just wanted to ask you,
yeah.
Richard, are you there with us?
Yes, yes, I'm
I
here.
don't
I'm
see the
here.
chat. So
I am here. I can hear you.
yeah, you're there. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, you were frozen on the screen for a bit. Okay. Okay. So, taking cues from that, my question is, what are the trends? What are some of the trends in this movement? Because it's not static. So
yeah.
what are some of the movements, sorry, trends in, in that, process
Yeah,
where it might
you really
lead to
raised one.
if we don't address it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you really raised some. This is very, this is nice points. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Can you hear me? Yeah. As I said, so like I have some friends in uh, Germany that they have a very big grant to go to really understand all these points. So the point is, as you say, the fish are moving up to Senegal, Mauritania, where it's not really of economic anything able to value there. So they are seeing a lot of fish stocks and species that they don't really need, and that's why. So two things are now this thing happening there. We are seeing the emergence of like this in fish meals, because people have seen an opportunity to create these meals there to process those fish that is not being eaten by them. But so that's why this new project is that the idea is to harvest that fish that you don't eat, process it, send it back to the people that consume it. So, but that needs to for us to create a transboundary trade where that fish is being processed in the countries where they are now found. Because of course, the same, based on food culture, cuisines, the same fish consumed in Cameroon might not be the same fish of interest in Mauritania. So what do they really do with all that stuff? So that's why the new trend now is how do we package it back and send back to the countries where it's really being consumed. So that's why we are encouraging this transboundary communication where countries can really talk. And of course, we are seeing new trends where tons and tons of smoked fish is being sent from Senegal to Togo because they have seen that Togolese need that fish because that fish was from there. But now Senegal people don't really but they need it. So they are now processing and are sending it back. So, but that is one way they have seen. But not all the countries are really doing that because but we need a framework, a very strong system that those kind of trade. Of course, now we know the whole well about trade. Trade needs to be countries agreeing. So that's why what we are now pushing is that there should be a more transboundary approach in how we see movement of fish, one, fish trade, and the governance of the fisheries, so that there can be this communication. Okay, hey, we have seen that you now have a lot of fish species you don't really eat. What do you do with it? So does that move? And also, we are also now scared because we don't know if the fishers also will now move up north. If everybody moves up north, we will not be having empty beaches. Like you will go there, you will not see anyone because people have now moved because they're trying to follow those fishes. So we don't really know how that will happen and how can we really avoid this migration or movement of people too much. So that is some of the dynamics that some projects now are trying to see. How do we create that cross Gulf of Guinea network where they can bring back some of those fishes? Yeah.
And also the fish movement also shows the ecological health of the
Exactly.
place.
Yeah.
Why do
Yeah.
fish
Yeah.
move?
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
moving away because
Yeah.
there
But
is no policy, but they're moving away because there is something drastically
exactly.
changing.
Yeah. But then one battle that is happening is that of course fish meals are now really listening about to coming up. Because these countries, since they didn't know what to like do with all these stocks, the fish mills are now using them to process it for their own gain. So also there is a whole new scope now about the fight between the fish mills and the locals. How do we really have access to the resources? So that's the whole politics happening there with so much conflict. So that's the whole dynamic. So that's why the whole idea of the transboundary issue is that countries need to start to talk. We need to understand that fisheries is not because you have been blessed, you have a lot of fish now and you are confused. Tomorrow there might be no fish again. What do you do? Because that fish you have in abundance in your country, it came from somewhere, and those people there don't have enough food and they are now hungry. So we have all these dynamics happening within those areas. Yeah.
So we have more questions flowing in. So the next
Okay.
question is again from Faluke. Have you attempted to identify the types of injustice being faced by small-scale fishers? What are the coping mechanisms of the fisher?
Yeah, so so that is so cool. So we were part of the say, Ocean Defender work where we're trying to really show some of these inequalities happening there. Like for example, one case in Cameroon that I'll speak clearly is that we have seen where the industrial fleets they come damage the nets of the people, like take away their machines, able to small fishing nets. But when they try to complain, instead the government will rather arrest them and able to lock them up. So, you have your small boats, you go into the ocean, the big fleets come, damage your net. When you go to complain, you are instead the one being able to locked up. So because they want you to like just stay able to quiet. So we have seen multiple levels of these injustices happening within those spaces. And then also you have raised one very nice point is that remember, these are mostly migrant able to fishers. So one, when they even go and complain, the first thing is, can I see your this ID card? Can I see your passport? Of course, if a country is not really your country, you are scared to even go and talk. You cannot voice, you cannot just shout. Like, for example, I'm in Canada. I would say, for example, there are things I know the rights within my own limits. So there are things you can't do and you can't talk when it's not really your country of this origin. So we see a lot of so that's why we also have a very inclusive way is to see the governance beyond this system where the migrant fishers can feel free to also talk to other people, that, hey, we are facing this issue. So there's a lot of dynamics of injustices in terms of their material injustices. And then also, too, even in the way they try, because of course, you cannot compare people using small boats to be able to even compete with these massive industrial fleets. Because what they're also saying is that, no, fishers have their traditional knowledge. They know their traditional fishing grounds where they go and harvest their fish. But now, and then they know what type of the year to catch, what kind of fish to catch. But now these industrial fishers come and gather everything. Like they come, harvest even the small juveniles. So this has always been the complaint they have been saying, but their mouths are all sealed because where do you raise this complaint? Where do you go and talk? Because you can't. And the bad thing is that the foreign fleets, they have seen that this is a weakness. They have seen that the people on the ground cannot really mobilize and have a voice. So that's why, like even now, one project I'm trying to like really push is to even be able to organize the communities because there is no mobilization. In fact, I was in the coast for like 2 months. I didn't see any fishing group even talking about this because there is no able to empowerment. So one way is to empower the communities to be able to safeguard the ocean, and that start by them knowing their own voices within the space. So by forming small fishing group within their communities to be able to raise these points And so, I mean, I took it upon myself as one key agenda I want to really push to help them or organize them into small distinct the groups where they can be able to report these issues and to mobilize small points. So thank you so much for that point. But as I say, if you read more on the this thing, yeah, ocean defenders, you see a
Yeah,
lot about
maybe.
the this thing, yeah, Cameroon case. Yeah.
Maybe something to follow up, because Faluke is writing that he is aware that in some countries within the Gulf of Guinea, fishermen have established collaborative interactions for their fishing operations. So maybe something to follow up,
Oh, that would
uh,
be good. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
initiatives do
Okay.
exist as per Faluke's comment there,
Okay.
but,
Okay.
but yeah, there's, helpful
Yeah.
comment. The next one is Samuel Avalanza. Samuel is asking, is the swimming away of the fish related to nutrients availability in the environment? We were just chatting about it. I
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
joined and I don't know if this has already been discussed. Why do fish swim away? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I mean, well, one other point, I mean, we had just touched more on this is that, as the water keeps machine getting hotter, fishes move more into like this, this colder area. So, who knows, with time, we might see a lot of fish in this in North America because it's still cold here. But people here don't eat some of this small this pelagic. So there's this up as welling where they are following both like the coldness of the water. So it could be the nutrient as well. It could be just the temperature that enables them to like strive. So it is just the change in temperature happening within the coast tropics. So it is just that movement of people. I mean, of the fish based on. I mean, they are going to where it is more colder and they can reproduce more. Yeah.
Definitely, there are climate change as a
Yes.
driver,
Exactly.
is playing out
Yeah.
on many small-scale fisheries contexts, and this is probably an
Yeah.
unique case, where we're seeing fish movement,
Yeah.
related to some of that as well, But that also brings the point out, related to the previous discussion, is, I mean, there when you're talking about transboundary, collaborations and governance
Mhm.
arrangements, the starting point may be in the non-fisheries context, so one could look at, and I say this, based on experiences in other places that we work.
Mhm.
Uh, Transboundary governance collaborations could start from, say, if there is anything going on in terms of climate change,
Yes. Yeah.
so it doesn't have to start with the fisheries itself, because, one can always harness the strength uh, that is already there in existing collaborations, and I
Mhm.
would imagine that there is probably, climate change related collaborations or transboundary collaborations or cross
Yeah.
nation collaborations that are going on, and fisheries could be one element of those kind
Yeah.
of transboundary processes, so that you don't create a new whole new process altogether,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
try to kind of make it more encompassing, and of course climate change seems to be a critical factor in the problem that you are talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, okay. So next comment is from Raymond Ailu. And Raymond is saying, thanks for the great talk on the transboundary fisheries. I would say maybe we need more integrated governance system for Gulf of Guinea, including maritime security, fisheries, and fish food trade as, RM exists.
Yeah, yeah,
River
yeah,
management
yeah,
exists. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, relates
yeah,
to what we were just
yeah,
talking
exactly.
about, that
Raymond also, I wish this he could talk, but he's like obviously one of those working in that big fishing project, trying to see how we can bring back some of the fishes from those countries where they have excess to like send it back. So he is like one of the colleagues in those who are trying to help in the area. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and
Raymond. Yeah.
there is one more comment from Faluke here. The small
Yeah.
pelagic play a key role in the fish nutrition of small-scale fisheries communities. Converting these to fish meals should be regulated. It's a
Yeah,
big
exactly.
issue.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You are the best person to work on it, because you work on food as well, so
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the ongoing conflicts between
The fish
food,
meal,
fish
aquaculture.
meal, and
Yeah,
all of aquaculture, and all of that is
yeah,
part of the transboundary
yeah,
discussions, not only in the Gulf of Guinea but also in other
yeah.
places.
Yeah.
in the world itself. I remember there are some parts of the world they call it trash fish industry. So
Yeah.
the volume of fish, quote unquote, that is
Yeah.
not valued for food anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, they call it trash fish. And there are
Yeah.
now
Trust.
fishing
Yeah.
fleets that go out into the ocean, not to catch fish for food, but for catch fish for, I
For
mean,
the
food,
fish meals.
food
Yeah.
for not
Exactly.
humans, but,
Exactly.
there is a
Exactly.
trash fish industry. If you go to the,
Yeah.
Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, that
Mm.
coast, you will see that there is a whole industry. There are,
Wow.
fishing boats after boats that
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
in and come out just to catch trash fish. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Gambia
so,
too. Gambia also has the same case of these people. Like there's a whole fighting happening there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, There is a comment from, I don't know, there is no name here, but I will just read it out anyways. We have 10 minutes left. Is there any climate change and market-induced changes in the choice of fish capture in these communities? How could moving fish and static boundaries between communities work?
No, I mean, you have really raised, I mean, that's a very nice point. So one decent challenge we have there is that these abortive systems, they were all medicine multi-species, so the artificial just go in there, harvest as much as they can, so that even makes them, so I mean, they can only know there is change when they go to harvest fish and they're not seeing a particular species. But if you ask them, since they are not really educated in those spaces, they will not know what is really happening. But what we are saying is that with the whole climate change, some fish species are moving more northward, so that leaves them. So what they keep thinking is that maybe it is over harvesting or maybe the fish stocks are no longer there. But what we now know from the science is that they are moving up north. So they are forced to now harvest only what they can. So it's just about them. So although they have been in this fisheries, they have their local knowledge, but they don't really know that it is because of climate change inducing this change in the whole species thing. So I mean, this is a very like real life example of how like changing in this in temperature of the water is influencing the kind of species they can harvest. And what we are even seeing now is that the real small the pelagic that are very commonly consumed is no longer there again. So now they only harvest some species that were not traditionally consumed in the area. So it makes even the food this in dynamics complex because you used to always get your local fish, but now you are seeing a whole different species that you're not really used to consuming it. And what the new trend we're being seeing now is that most of now people go more to the cold stores. So cold stores is where you sell, I mean, with medicine frozen fishes to buy some of their preferred species because they cannot have that from the coast anymore. Because even if they see that at the coast, it is so expensive. And also one other point is that where is the fish from the cold store this thing coming from? And what we are seeing is that this is coming from these same foreign fleets. They'll go to those countries, harvest the fish, process it, send it back to Cameroon as an import. So now Cameroonians go and buy this fish, their own same fish that has moved up north in a cold store. So there is this dynamics happening there so that's why I said there is more research to be done to really show. And that's why one of the areas is to really understand the fish food environment. How do we see how is consumers' choices being influenced by the kind of fish they see? One, two, can they even buy it? And then three, is it even like this? Yeah, available as well. So we have all these dynamics happening within those same areas. Yeah,
And market trends are very interesting. Market
yeah,
works in two-way,
yeah,
process.
yeah.
Sometimes market influences what is an important species and what does the market
Exactly,
want. Therefore,
exactly.
people scramble to catch that species.
Exactly.
Sometimes, market takes in what is available, so
Yes, yes,
they find
exactly,
something and which had
exactly.
previously no market, but market takes it in,
Yeah,
creates, so it works in both ways. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very influential in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
And I know one point is also to know how does market influence sustainability too. So there is that connection that we need to also explore because if people prefer to buy fish more from the coastals, the imported fish, does that mean the fisheries in the ocean is gaining back stock? They are coming back. We don't really know that because maybe because there is no availability. So I mean, market brings a lot of nuances within that space to really understand and how does that play with the sustainability aspects of the fisheries. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so probably our last question here is from Nabia. And Nabia is asking, what technological or capacity building initiatives could be introduced to help small-scale fisheries actors participate more effectively in the blue economy while maintaining ecological, it's a tough
Yeah.
question, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I'll leave it that, so we want to respond to,
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, one approach that I mean, as we have stated, is that there's a lack of, let's say, investment in those areas. In like, if for example, yeah, let's say Cameroon, we don't really have a lot of like, like even those groups, like they're not even having enough skill set to really address some of these issues. So one way is how do we empower them? How do we give them all the resources and the knowledge to be able to now start to address some of the issues within that space? So it's a very complex point, but one step is just how to empower. I mean, of course, we know some musky fishers in many countries don't really have enough power and access in some of these things. So, I mean, but I'll be happy to talk more with you on that using when we meet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is already an influence. Your first slide
Yeah.
was about showing how big ships operate in the same
Exactly.
area. So there is already that dynamics.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
alerted
Exactly.
us in the very first
Yeah.
slide in itself. Um, I, you know, I think, and I will try to, bring it to a conclusion at this point because we are
Oh,
just about at time. So thank you very much, Richard. The talk was amazing. I mean, in terms of, bringing out
yeah.
so many issues, and
Yeah.
but at the same
Thank you.
time, the discussions were, fabulous, and thanks to the
Yeah. Yeah.
audience, who
Yeah. Yeah.
engaged in a big, big way, and so their interest in discussing this,
Yeah.
important issue in the Gulf of Guinea. And I know in Richard's, big book that he mentions, Gulf of Guinea and Cameroon, and these are all high priority areas that he wants to continue working on, and he will hear more, as he writes and publishes, and maybe
Yeah.
another talk in a few years on this platform or somewhere else. So thank you for the good work. Thank you for the important
Mhm.
work that you're doing, but also sharing that work with us and generating some new discussions around small scale fisheries in the Gulf of Guinea.
Yeah.
B2B works in that region, Senegal, Nigeria.
Nigeria.
So
Yeah.
there is a lot of interest, and you could see that reflected through Ariola's question, who is right
Yeah.
there in that place. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll continue this discussion. And I know next month on around this time, we will have another talk. And we invite you all to that talk again, and we'll announce it in a few days of time. So thank you once more to Richard for the fabulous talk, and also the
Thank you.
audience for making it so interesting through the meaningful discussions. Uh, Thank you very much once again. Bye bye.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.